for joining today's dialogue session. Chief guest is, as you know, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and my name is Naoko Ishii. I am Executive Vice President and actually serving as a Master of Ceremony for you today. We have a very packed program, starting with the President Fujii's welcoming remarks. Then we hear from Jeff, Professor Sachs for 20 minutes. Then the two of them actually entering into the conversation, which I may moderate. Then maybe to your interest, we open the floor for 15 minutes for Q&A, and I'm still trying to finish everything in 1 hour. Let's see how it works. So, without much ado, I'd like to invite President Fujii for his opening remarks.
Well, so it's not exactly a remark, but I'd like to give you some very brief background of this lecture by Professor Jeffrey Sachs. So this is indeed the really great opportunity for us to listen to his speech here, and also to have some interaction with him, especially for you, students. And so I heard that we have already like 200 registration here. So as you know, we have at UTokyo we have a guided principle which is called the UTokyo Compass. And there also I have made a kind of great emphasis on green transformation, the importance of green transformation, and also working over such kind of the kind of global scale issues. And as you know, so we are facing all these unprecedented challenge of global scale, including climate change, biodiversity issues, or soil and air pollution, and for example, the ocean plastics, microplastics in the ocean, and so on. So basically, we are, as humanity, pushing so much the kind of capacity of our planet Earth. Also, so in this situation, we will definitely need to think about what we can do, and especially in this very difficult international situation with a kind of, for example, the geopolitical tension. As you know, so it was a really nice moment that we had kind of agreement on SDGs, which was 2015, and then at that time it was like we looking ahead 15 years from that point, and that was looking at the 2030. So then here it's 2023. It's we are almost halfway already, like 7 years since, 8 years in fact. But then the situation is, so we feel like we are very much off track of the kind of concept or the roadmap that we do in the SDGs. So then, as you know, Professor Sachs is definitely, behind the MDGs and SDGs. And also, he is very much active in forming a network of people, not only in academia, but also business people and practitioners and so on. So that means that he is also very active in implementing that idea. So he's already, very much contributed to the kind of from the concept and formulation of the SDGs, but practice part. So that I believe that if you think about discussing all these sustainability issues, we cannot find no other better person than the Professor Jeffrey Sachs. So with that, I wanted to say that this background, and then I would like to invite Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and please join me to invite him to the stage.
President Fujii. Fujii and President Ishii, not President Ishii, Professor Ishii. And students, thank you for the warm welcome here. The high point of this session is your questions. So don't be shy about the questions, because when you have issues on your mind, please raise them, or I will call on you. So that's the deal that we're going to make. The world is in a very difficult stage right now, because the crises that we face are global scale, and they're difficult and complicated crises. And every month now we're setting new heat records, because the climate change is already out of control. We've known about the risk for a long time, and the first major treaty to address the climate change, for example, was 1992, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So that's 31 years ago. And we've hardly done anything to actually head off the emergency. So this is the puzzle. And even when we have heat waves and forest fires and terrible storms, in my country, the United States, the politicians just, well, what are we supposed to do? They don't do anything. This system's broken in the United States. We have little bits and pieces here and there, but no plan. So it's really a big puzzle, because we need a plan not only in the United States, but in all 193 UN member countries. We need to cooperate. We need to implement real changes. And this is quite a drama, how to get this done. And we're all puzzling about this, because it's not a mystery each day that this is very tough to make politics work right. And I have spent much of the last 30 years, like Professor Ishii, in her various capacities, also puzzling how do you make this international system. It is a system, but not an efficient system. How do you make the system actually function? And a clue as to the difficulty was an expression used by one of my dearest teachers and gurus, who was a professor of biology at Harvard University, and some of you will know the name E.O. Wilson, who was a leading evolutionary biologist. And he used to say something very wise, because he was interested in human behavior, in human evolution, and in human society. And he used to say, before he passed away just recently, he said, "We have entered the 21st century with our Stone Age emotions, our medieval institutions, and our godlike technologies." And his point was, we run at different speeds. Human nature runs at the speed of geologic time, or evolutionary time. Tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years have made human nature. Our capacity to cooperate, our capacity to mess up, our difficult, complex behaviors, our tribalism, so that we're able to cooperate within a group, to hate the other group, because that's also a deep part of human nature. Our institutions tend to be rather slow moving. We went to Sensoji this morning, Senso Temple, and it was established, if I remember the year 642. So that is roughly 1,400 years ago. The U.S. Constitution was very clever when it was designed, but it was designed in 1787. I would not design it this way now. Believe me, it's a mess of a political system. And it's also been hacked, because the hackers, who tend to be the billionaires and the big corporations, have figured out how to manipulate the system for their advantage. So the system's really been broken. It's too easy to manipulate. And if you have a system that operates for a long period of time and it dispenses money and it makes taxes and it sets regulations, it's easy to hack if you have decades to figure out how to hack it. So the system has been hacked. And that's what Wilson meant by medieval institutions. And our technologies are godlike in a way, except with the twist. And that is that they are nearly miraculous in what can be accomplished. You take some silicon, which is sand, and you somehow do the right processing, and you get a supercomputer out of it. And the materials for that are a few bucks. And the output of it is something completely astounding. And we've discovered, but it has turned out to be the case that various mathematical inventions, including neural networks designed 40 years ago, really can play Go and chess. And not just that, they can teach themselves through reinforced learning to be the best players in all of human history, superhuman, within about 4 hours from a blank slate, the tabula rasa. So I like the fact that AlphaGo Zero, the chess program, became the world's greatest grandmaster at chess, and basically learned all the openings that took 1,000 years to discover in chess in 4 hours of self-play, because it played itself about 50 million times in those 4 hours, and it discovered everything that the grandmasters had discovered over 1,000 years. That's pretty good. But the problem is, with all technology, put that together with medieval institutions and Stone Age emotions, and you can destroy the world with this great technology, or you can build a wonderful world, and that's a choice. And we learned that in a very difficult way with the nuclear age, of course, which Japan suffered the first victim of the nuclear age, because it was a few geniuses that figured out what could be done to make an atomic bomb. And then it was given into the hands of people who are not exactly geniuses, like presidents and generals and so on. And I've studied that issue for decades. The atomic bomb should never have been dropped on Japan, period. Japan was trying to surrender at the same moment that the bomb was dropped. But the plan to drop the bomb was set several months earlier, and it was a bureaucratic process. And our president, who many people like, and I've come to very much dislike over the course of my grown-up life, Harry Truman, said, "I never thought twice about it." That's bad, Harry. You should have thought twice about it. And he's regarded as a common man who became a terrific president, and I regard him as a common man who became a president and did not think adequately about this. And it scares the wits out of me. Who has the nuclear bombs right now? Because I'm not sure about my president, I'll tell you that. sometimes forgets which way to go off the stage. And I'm not sure about many other leaders as well. So now we put artificial intelligence into this, and we think about advanced biotechnology, which in my opinion, though it's only a guess, but I studied it very intensively, probably created the virus that caused the pandemic. Probably. Because the US was investing heavily with China to re-engineer SARS-like viruses. And it just happened that the kind of re-engineering they wanted to do is what showed up in late 2019. Well, we don't know because governments also don't tell the truth. So we don't really know what happened. Okay, that's all backstory to say we have big problems and we don't have the institutions to solve these problems right now. And at a core level, what happened is that because of better and better institutions, because of better and better technology, we have reached a true global civilization that is deeply interconnected. I, as an economic commentator and amateur economic historian working hard at it, believe we've always been interconnected as humanity, and I wrote a book about this in 2020 called The Ages of Globalization, saying we've always been interconnected, but we've never been so intensively interconnected, and we never had crises at the global scale the way we have it. You could not change climate with pre-industrial technologies. You could change it a little bit. You could chop down a lot of trees or not chop down a lot of trees, but you could not warm the planet as we already have by 1.2 degrees C, pushing us to the highest temperatures of the last 125,000 years. You need advanced technologies for that. We could not face the challenges that we face without this technological revolution of the last 2 centuries. So these are new problems, and our institutions are not up to this. We are organized basically at the national level for problems that transcend from local to global. And the local problems often don't get solved because even cities don't have the financing means to solve the problems that they face, because finance operates at the national level generally. That's where the tax power basically lies. But what about at the global level? Well, we don't have solutions for 3 main kinds of problems. One kind of problem is that there are a lot of poor people who are suffering deprivation in the world today, even though the world is very rich on average. So that's one major problem. A second major problem is the collision of economy and environment. Because we have an economy at the global scale, roughly $100 trillion of output per year, that is now imposing such dire environmental consequences on biodiversity, ecosystem functioning, and climate, and depletion of ocean resources and terrestrial resources, that in another 20 years we will hit tipping points or irreversibilities that are completely disastrous, and we'll say, oops, that was really a shame that we just wrecked the whole planet for the next 10 generations or more. So this is the next problem. And the third problem is that nation states go to war with each other, and we can't afford this, and we do not have solutions for peace. I was an advisor to President Gorbachev. I was an advisor to President Yeltsin. I was was an advisor to President Kuchma, who was the first president of independent Ukraine. So I've been watching that situation for more than 30 years. I can tell you briefly, there is no reason at all for this war in Ukraine, other than a lot of stupidity that has gone along, of which I blame the United States actually for the preponderant amount. Because they just wanted to push NATO. And the Russians kept saying, please don't put NATO next to our border. And the US is a little hard of hearing because it's arrogant. And finally, collision. So this is the third problem. So poverty within wealth, environmental calamity, and war and peace. And we don't have governance structures to solve this problem. But we do have a new Center for the Global Commons here. This is a breakthrough because all of these issues are about the global commons. How can we govern globally when we have national politics, when we have medieval institutions? That's the puzzle. I'll just stop here by making one more observation. I think the way to do it, and I've been making this bet myself for the last 25 years, and I will continue because I'm stubborn, is that the way to do this is to set clear goals that are achievable and correct, and then work every day to make the systems move to those goals. And so that's why I got involved with the UN 23 years ago on an hour-by-hour basis, first with the Millennium Development Goals and now with the Sustainable Development Goals, because my view is goal-oriented behavior can change how institutions are designed and work. And engineers understand this very well. You engineer a system to achieve an outcome. Politics is not generally like that. Politics is medieval institutions and fighting for power within them. But let me just end with one historical example that I know of having a goal and then changing the institutions to achieve it. And that is Japan's history in 1868, the Meiji Restoration. Why? Because in 1853, there was bad news in Edo Bay. An obnoxious Commodore, Matthew Perry, sent by the U.S. Navy, showed up and said, now we run the show. And the shogun wasn't too happy about it, but the military power was with the United States and with the others, and they forced Japan to sign a treaty the next year, a typically misnamed treaty, the Amity and Friendship Treaty, which, if you translate it, means you do what we want or we will bomb you. So Japan signed that treaty in 1854. And by 1858, many other amity and friendship treaties were signed at gunpoint. And 10 years later, there was a political revolution here saying, we're not going to survive as a country unless we get our act together. And what I really have studied and admired for my whole professional career has been one particular action which I really like, which was sending a fact-finding mission around the world, the Iwakura mission, in 1871. Because you couldn't just Google it then. You couldn't just get online and say, we'd like to have a Zoom with you next week. So you had to go around the world for a year and a half plus institutions. The samurai class was ended within 5 years, in 1877, after hundreds of years, because we need to move on. So this kind of goal-oriented institutional change is actually possible. And we need a rational approach that is based on ethics, fairness, and rigor, that actually understands the problem, what needs to be done, and the fact that we need to do it peacefully and inclusively, and stop playing games. Politics is not for vested interests and powerful people. Politics is for everybody. So it should be. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Jeff. It's really, as always, very inspiring. And I just want to start with maybe one question for both of you. Both President Fujii as well as you mentioned this, that we were at such a critical juncture as a humanity. And that Jeff, you mentioned that it's still important to set a goal and to see how we can shift the system, including the institution. And but the fact is that we are still struggling so much to how to shift the system after 7 years of having gotten goal, SDGs, and Paris Agreement. So my question for both of you is that where you see that a kind of leverage point or the sweet spot or the pressure point to shift the system while we are fighting with the vested interest of this stalemate situation. And after this question, of course I will talk about what academia can do in that, but maybe we can start with a broad question of the system change. Jeffrey, do you want to start?
Thank you. I don't like to go in front of the president, but if you ask, I'll be polite and respond first. The leverage point is that humanity really wants a decent world and a peaceful world and solutions. The politicians, sometimes not so much. They want to keep their jobs, or they want power, or they are in front of particular interest groups. But the leverage point for us is that the things we're talking about, stopping the climate change or protecting the environment, really are global public goods, things that we need. That's our leverage, to hold up what is really important and keep forcing governments. You need to solve that problem. And then to help them from academia to solve that problem. In my country right now, in the United States, the problem, there are many problems. The politics is very corrupt. There's a lot of money that changes hands. Campaigns cost a lot of money. Rich people pay for the campaigns, so the politicians do what the rich people want. That's one part that's broken. The other part that's broken is the United States has the idea that it has all these enemies like China or Russia, and we must be at war. We must be ready for war. That's going to be a disaster if we go down that road. So for me, the two most important points are, first, we really need to solve these big problems, because otherwise we're all in a disaster. And second, we need to stop the wars and the geopolitical conflicts. I am absolutely against anything that says China's on the other side, we're on this side. I'm against alliance politics. I'm against NATO. I'm against having military alliances one side or another. This is not popular view in Japan with the government. But I'm against this idea that it's one side versus another side, because I don't believe it is. And I want to quote one of my favorite quotations of my favorite president during my lifetime, President John F. Kennedy. He said, indeed, across the gulfs and barriers that now divide us, hostility is a fact, but we must remember there are no permanent enemies. Hostility is a fact, but not a ruling law. The supreme reality is our indivisibility as children of God and our common vulnerability on this planet. And so what he was saying is, don't believe there's a permanent enemy. Don't believe China's on the other side, we're on this side. We have to build up our militaries because we're going to have war. Or that they're always going to be the enemy. That mentality is completely wrong, historically also. If you know history, you know it's just not the right way to look at things. So I think that this is the most important point right now among the great powers. Stop bickering with each other. Start being polite with each other. And sit down to solve the common problems that we're facing.
Thank you so much, Jeff. May I invite President Fujii?
Well, yes. So what's said by Professor Sachs is very much related to my also basic idea. So that is also somehow related to our UTokyo compass. But so I would like to also put the emphasis on the importance of dialogue. And so dialogue is, so I'm always saying that this is not just a kind of having a conversation sitting in front of you, but also this is something, a sort of practice to know something unknown together with the people, so together with someone else. So to know something unknown, so you will need to pose a question together. Or you need to pose a question and then you need to share the question together with the people. And then with that, you're basically thinking together with someone else. So that this is, for example, exactly all the sustainability thing and also political tension and so on. So that is one thing. So that having such kind of place for dialogue is just so important for us. So that I think maybe this is somehow related to the role of the university or academia. So we would like to set up, or we like to take such kind of role in this very much complicated situation. That's one thing. Another important point is, so we all need to, put or pull back the viewpoint from a kind of supplier's viewpoints or governance viewpoint or those kind of viewpoints into like a citizen viewpoint or like a user's viewpoint or whatever. So that means that from the viewpoint of individuals and citizens, so you will need to think about what would be the situation that we want or what would be the life we would like to pursue. So then that is leading to the kind of right, for example, design of the system or institution, whatever. So that we also like to push that way to be, for us to be able to think in such kind of way that, so because in the 20th century, it was more like, so everything was more like from the supplier side. All these mass-produced production format and so on, so the economy itself is also from the viewpoint of manufacturers or providers. But all this success of the, for example, like software or tech industry, so that is basically they are looking at the kind of viewpoint of the users. Yeah. So that is very much a kind of evidence. It's a kind of really good evidence that we could change somehow the world if it is good or bad. But so that this, change in the viewpoint is very important for us to discuss on this issue.
If I may make a comment about dialogue, which I completely agree with prisoner's dilemma? The concept of the prisoner's dilemma. So in economics or in game theory, the prisoner's dilemma is a situation where cooperation is better for both sides, but it's even better for the other one to cooperate and you cheat on them. And so there's always the temptation to cheat. And if both sides cheat, both sides lose. And so in game theory, the predicted outcome in formal game theory in a prisoner's dilemma is that both sides will cheat and both sides will end up losing. It's as if both sides go to war rather than cooperating with each other to keep the peace, because if one side says we'll keep the peace but the other side launches the attack, well, that leads both sides to end up cheating and disaster strikes. Here's where dialogue comes in. It is probably the most interesting result of experimental game theory, that if you have people play a prisoner's dilemma, they'll cooperate half the time, roughly, and half the time cheat on the counterparts and end up in a bad situation. If it's economics department students, they cooperate maybe 10% of the time. If it's nursing students, they cooperate much more. Now, here's where dialogue comes in. If you let the two players talk with each other beforehand, even if that talk is not binding, you can't make a contract, you can't make a deal. It's what economists call cheap talk. You can say what you want. The mere fact of having the dialogue tends to raise the cooperation to about 90%. I love that. In reality, we're human beings. Those are partly Stone Age emotions, because Stone Age emotions are also cooperation, not just conflict. But we have some inbuilt capacity to cooperate, which is triggered by remembering that the other side are humans. So if the two sides are not talking with each other, well, they're more likely to go to war. If they just talk with each other, they're much more likely to find the peaceful outcome. So the war in Ukraine started, well, it started many years ago, but the current phase of it started February 24th, 2022, a year and a half ago. How many times have President Biden and President Putin spoken since February 24th, 2022? That would be 0. I keep telling them they can use my Zoom account. Or they could borrow my phone. What's the matter with them? They're grown-ups, I think. Talk to each other. So I really support this, President Fujii. Dialogue it's not just a nice thing, it's the problem-solving approach to social dilemmas.
Absolutely, yeah. So now I want to ask one more question for both of you. It's about the role of academia. And now we have been, well, actually maybe I have been personally struggling to how to reach the users, so that the citizens, just borrowing President Fujii's term, how to reach the science to get through the scientific message to them to change the decision, change the behavior. And then, so somehow we are failing collectively to do the move. So that's one question I really want to hear from you, and then how we can really do better job on that. And then maybe relatedly, for multi-stakeholder coalitions, how do you to meet the potential role of academia to work with non-academic people, or the users, the politicians, policymakers, and the business people, to really shift the system? I found it exceedingly difficult to do it in Japan, because we are very much a kind of siloed society, so that compared with maybe European or maybe US. So that maybe actually the question for President, do you think do we have any better way to create or catalyze a social change?
Right. So the breaking silos is a so important idea, and I believe that the academia or universities can take such role to be able to set up a kind of forum for the people to have this dialogue kind of thing. Because the university itself is a kind of neutral entity, so that, I mean, even if there are kind of, sections throughout the, for example, industry or government, whatever, but then they can come here and talk to each other. So that is one of the very important role of the university. But for us also too, it's a kind of, so it has been a kind of a wall in between the academia and society. So that breaking down that wall is also very important. So that which is I'm strongly feeling that we will need to have some more communication with the society, because so like all these, for example, SDGs thing. So we can do more about what would be what is the actual situation, and also so let people be aware of this very serious situation throughout our environmental conditions. So, but in that sense, so university also should take a role, and then putting down this wall, and then to have some more interaction with the people outside, and then like citizens. So for that, I think the very important thing is to have some more ideas or more inputs from the young generation. So because I very much felt like the importance of the youth taking part, almost like a major part in this kind of activity. Like I participated in the Stockholm Plus 50 meeting, and there are so many youth groups promoting their activities in the meeting. And then if you think about it, so it's a kind of 50 years scale discussion. Like from the 1972, we had the first human environment meeting of the UN, and then last year was 50 years since then. And then if you think about kind of 50 years ahead, then you will be the kind of, you will need to take the leadership for solving all these issues. So in that sense, so if we can hear more about this kind of ideas from you, it would be very great.
Jeff, anything you want to add?
Three barriers or walls that need to come down. One between the university and society, especially government and business, because universities have a lot of expert knowledge and a lot of capacity to add to solutions. The second is the walls across the departments and schools within a university. Because if you take an issue like climate change, it's complicated. You really do need the climatologists, you need the energy sector engineers, you need the economists, at least a few, you need the political scientists, you need the behavioral psychologists, and they should be talking and working together on practical approaches. So that's the second. And the third is the intergenerational, obviously, which is that universities are great because I learned over 40 years the students get younger and younger every year. That's really important because you know how things work better than we do. We have some experience and some knowledge that has come from that, but this is your world and you need to fix it, and we need to help you fix it. And so that, I think, is pretty much a unique feature of universities, the intergenerational capacity of universities. So it's not easy work. I know that Professor Ishii made pathways to decarbonization, and the government or business looked at them and said, no, we don't like that. But you know, that's exactly where the dialogue needs to keep being pushed. Okay, if not that, what's your pathway? How can you do this? You cannot not have a pathway. This is the real world. You don't get to just opt out and pretend there's no climate crisis. You have to have a pathway. We put forward ours. What is yours? So this goes on for a long time. There's a lot of tension that can set in between the politicians and who want to give an easy answer because they want to win an election, or they want to stay in power, or they want to represent a special interest rather than a common interest. But, you know, we're pretty good at hammering the facts, and I think the dialogue then really enriches the outcomes, and you can't fake it all the time. We need to get down to realities and actual solutions. So I think universities can and must have a very distinctive and significant role, but we have to also push our way into that role.
Thank you so much, Jeff, Professor Sachs, for your encouragement. So now it's your turn. So can you raise the hand for questions? Great. I don't know how to handle it. Could we just go from here to there? Okay, from you.
Thank you for your talk. So my question is, I know that you played a very critical role in overseeing the transition of like Soviet Russia from communism to capitalism. And as you mentioned in your talk, you were there firsthand as advisor. And I was wondering how that experience might have shaped the way that you see the tension between the United States and Russia today, and also sustainable development, and also diplomacy globally.
Yeah.
You could briefly mention who you are.
Oh, I'm my name is Naoki.
And actually department?
Oh, I'm in the Bungaku literature department.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. My name is Nina Tala. I'm actually an international student from the UK on the UTokyo program. And my question is related to kind of your youth engagement that you were talking about. And as the next generation of students going into the world and into careers of politics, for example, what do you suggest we could do to evolve politics to be for everyone, like you suggested? Like what steps can we as youth now take to kind of push for a change of that system that we're talking about? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just passing to her. And if you really want to address either to the Jeff or the President, you just mention it. Otherwise, we just take it more like a general question.
Thank you. So my question would be for Professor Sachs. My name is Naoko, and I'm an international student at the University of Tokyo as well. And Jeffrey, you talked about today about this big puzzle. And actually, my colleague Amimata and I published for the Global Governance Forum an article titled "The Missing Piece of the Puzzle: Youth." And building on Arima's question, and as an advocate for youth agency, I wanted to ask you for your view on the role that youth can play in sustainable development. And on another but similar note, if you see the United Nations next year's Summit of the Future as a feasible possibility for change towards goal-oriented institutions and as a forum for clear solution-making and achieving. Thank you.
Hi, my name is George Gonzalez. This question is for both. It's all right. Well, first, thank you. And then also, I just wanted to ask, since you were talking about dialogue and communication so much, I know how important that is now, but I also noticed that it seems like more and more people are becoming inward looking and sort of thinking more about their own self. And I think it seems like this trend, I think it's stronger in maybe Europe or in the US, but I think, especially in academic and universities worldwide, there's this leaning toward identity and really deciding who you are based on an identity. And it really seems to be pushing people in the wrong direction, away from dialogue. And I wonder what you think we can that, how to work around, get out of that trap. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just passing to him, and then we go.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. My name is Eric. I'm from Sustainability Science on Kashima campus. And my question basically continues from the statement over there about the Russian transition to capitalism, and essentially it is about, given that current crises all seem to be can be tracked back to this growth imperative in capitalism. The question is, should we actually try to overcome and move to a different kind of economic system that completely leaves us behind?
Hi, hello, thank you for your presentation. I actually know your work since a long time now, so I'm really happy to see you in person. My name is Lara Herman. I'm a graduate student at the Graduate School of Public Policy working on economics and development. And my question are actually to the same subject. It's about sustainable development. The first one is, knowing that the UN frameworks around climate change have a certain constraint when it comes to legally binding the countries or the member state. I was wondering maybe what are the tools that we can use in sustainability to make sure that they follow the rules that, for example, have been put in place by the Paris Agreement, and how to make sure that they follow this path that has been recommended. And as well, jumping on what you said about the different stakeholders involved in sustainable development. So we have engineers, public policy makers, economists. How can we use dialogue to make those people work together? Because a lot of, especially on the engineering side, businesses, corporations, governments, there are really, really different actors with really different mentality and understanding of sustainability. So maybe do you have a recommendation to kind of get them all to the same level of knowledge, but also of practical experience of sustainability on the ground? Thank you so much.
Let me say a few words about this Russia business over the last 30-some years. Russia adopted a quite terrible socio-political economic system after the Bolshevik Revolution. It was bad luck. And it was bad luck to have Stalin, and it was bad luck to create a 100% state-owned command economy. And by 1985, when Gorbachev came to power, this was a complete mess. Gorbachev was a wonderful person, actually, because he wanted to reform the system peacefully. But it was very difficult to reform the system peacefully because it was a command system. Natural incentives did not operate. There was no private property, there was fear, there was command. And when the political force and fear was removed, the system didn't operate because there were not the normal mechanisms almost anywhere for proper orientation. By the end of the 1980s, the crisis was very deep. And it was deep in all of the Soviet sphere, which means not only the Soviet Union, but the countries that had been under Soviet domination in Central and Eastern Europe as well. So this is a story that I could talk about for hours, and I'll try to make it 3 minutes. I was asked to help Poland make this market transformation starting in 1989. And I saw that Poland was in very deep crisis, so it had to make internal changes. I quoted the Meiji Restoration many times, believe me, back in 1989. But I said that internationally, there should be financial help for Poland because this was a very difficult period, big financial crisis. And the things that I recommended: cancel Poland's debt, give special assistance, were generally carried out because when I recommended these things, the White House supported them. And the European, it was the European community then, not the Union even, They supported what I recommended. And after 1 year of crisis in Poland, the economic recovery began quite quickly. It's that reason why President Gorbachev's economic advisor called me and said, we want to do what Poland's doing. And I said, I'll help you. But when I joined with other colleagues to recommend the same kind of help from the United States and Europe, they said, help them? They're the enemy. We're not going to help them. So Gorbachev got no help at all financially. I was shocked because I said, look at Poland, it works, do the same thing. No. Then the Soviet Union ended in December 1991. I was in the room in the Kremlin when it ended, actually, very unusual. And President Yeltsin sat across from me and he, to our delegation, said, gentlemen, because it was all men, it was, gentlemen, the Soviet Union has ended. I heard it first, sitting in the Kremlin with President Yeltsin across from me. And he asked me, help us, because we are in financial crisis. I said, of course, Mr. President, we should do the same that was done for Poland. The White House said no. No. Why? To tell you why, I'd have to use language which is inappropriate. But basically, they're dumb. No perspective, no empathy, no history, but rather the attitude, we won, they lost. We don't have to help them. We're the sole superpower of the world now. We're the reigning heavyweight champion of the world. Help them? Second-rate country? That's their problem. That was the attitude. This went on for 30 years. Because the United States said, now we will expand NATO after promising to President Gorbachev no NATO enlargement. Promising. They cheated. Because why? Because they could. That's the prisoner's dilemma. Don't be a fool. Cooperate. Don't be a sucker. You're the most powerful. This has gone on for 30 years. President Putin said, don't bring NATO to Ukraine. The United States heard, oh, of course we're going to bring NATO to Ukraine. Who's he to tell us not to? They literally said, it's none of your business. None of our business what missiles you put next door to us? Yeah, none of your business. If you continue that approach, you end up with war. So this is a mindset problem. This isn't a technical economics problem. This is a problem of mindset, power. And a very good senator wrote a book more than almost exactly 60 years ago when he was complaining about American foreign policy, a U.S. senator, Fulbright. Some of you may be Fulbright scholars. He wrote a book called The Arrogance of Power. And he said, as our problem as a country is we don't listen to anyone else. We're going to go bomb Vietnam, we're not listening. And this has been this way for a long time. So this is the most basic answer that I can give you, which is, if my advice as a technical economist was bad, okay, get another advisor, but help them. But by the way, my advice wasn't that. I know how to make economic stabilization work, but you need some help. So anyway, that's that is the basic answer. And let me just quickly say, if I could, very quickly, about the role of all of us. Solve the problems. One problem that Japan faces is, what is the energy system going to be in the next 25 years? it better be zero emission. Now there's a debate. Should the nuclear power be used or not? Do we have other options? Come up with the options. Specify them. Use your technical knowledge. Make a plan. Engage then with the governor of Tokyo. Engage with the cabinet. You're the University of Tokyo. This is the leading university of this nation. It was established almost exactly 150 years ago. You'll be celebrating the 150th anniversary soon. Because this country needed a leading university to help provide answers. So the students should get together and make a plan. And then go to say to the Prime Minister, "Sir, please meet with us. We have a plan, you don't."
Good. All right, yeah. Prof. Yeah, okay, President Fujii.
Oh yes, but that's yeah. So the answer by the Professor Sachs is already enough, I guess. But yeah, so it's also. So I was going to talk about the making a plan by the student or by the group of students, whatever. Then that is bringing up as a kind of very important agenda. Or, for example, green transformation activity throughout the university or whatever, throughout maybe the metropolitan Tokyo area or at the nation level. So that is what something what we can or you can do for now. That is one thing, and also Professor Sachs said, so like setting the agenda and then setting the goal, maybe it's the right one, and then you bring in so many kinds of people, and then, but that is normally starting from the kind of sharing the same words or same terminology that you will need to have a kind of right discussion, but it will take time. But if you have a kind of right place and right people to talk together or discuss together, then you can definitely come up with a new idea for the solution to that goal set, the goal or problem that you set. So like this way. So if you really would like to do some more to make some more inputs to the real situation in society, then I think you can do such kind of activity as a group of, for example, students or whatever. Then we also, as a university, we would love to support such kind of activities. So that we hope we will be able to maybe have such kind of new system in the university discussing all those green transformation issues.
I want to do justice to this part of the room. So you are done.
Okay, Ryu goes again from the University of Tokyo. I do semiconductor engineering and microsystems. Okay, my question would be in setting a local goal, I think it's a necessity, but also a difficulty to include the most local viewpoints instead of the global goal. So, and I feel that you have a great balance between the macroscopic and the microscopic viewpoints. So I want to know the tips in how you do this.
Yes, thank you. My name is Malvina. I come from Albania, and I'm in the Department of Urban Engineering. So my question is about stakeholders. So if we see the end of the chain of the policy implementation, that we have the general public, but at the same time, those are the ones that are often excluded from all the discussion that we have when we talk about stakeholders who will solve our problems. So I believe that if we have a more educated and also empowered general public, then maybe we have better chances of solving our problems, or at the very least to hold the institutions more accountable. So I'm just wondering, what is your view on the role of the general public? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Yuta Inoue from the Graduate School of Agriculture and Life Sciences and I'm majoring in agricultural economics. And I would like to ask for Professor Sachs about the economic cooperation and the role of international trade for sustainable development. So I think the first point and second point that you raised as a serious problem, the international trade can contribute to solving these, reducing poverty or reducing confliction of economy and environment. So what is your opinion about this holistic economic system that can cooperate or can contribute to these development in sustainable way? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sienna, and I do evolutionary biology and paleontology. So I was curious about your very strong optimism towards sort of liberal international institutions, because the example you gave about like effective top-down change was national. It's like a national government with total monopoly over like power, finances, and whatsoever. So I really wanted to know sort of why you believe that dialogues and sort of effective action could happen in a scale that sort of transcends these monopolizing entities. So thank you very much.
So, hello Professor Sachs and also Professor Fujii. Just now Professor Sachs mentioned about Japan and the energy transformation. So this made me think of nuclear power in Japan, especially now that IAEA said that Japan can release the water into the sea, and there has been lots of like people who do not agree with this. And this actually links to the point of dialogue between academia and society, because like based on what my professor said, like the amount of radioactive waste is very low, and that shouldn't be something that people should worry about. Whereas society, from the like surface, they will think that it's something that one really needs to worry about. So based on your opinion, do you think that Japan should be allowed to release the water into the sea, or whether they should not be allowed? So, like Professor Sachs as an economist, what is your view, and Professor Fujii as a scientist, like what do you think about this?
I'm going to leave President Fujii the easy question about the water. And I'm going to take the hard ones. I'm going to talk about the question, how can this system actually work? And why do I like the international order? Or why am I optimistic about the international order? In economic theory, the idea of public goods is extremely important. The idea of public goods is that there is a class of goods that cannot efficiently be provided by decentralized, market-based production and consumption, but needs for one reason or another to be provided by collective action, typically by the government. And our road networks are like that. The power grid is like that. National defense, in principle, is like that. Environmental or responding to a pandemic is like that, and so forth. The fact of our time is that these public goods occur at all different scales. In ancient times, they were mostly local issues. When we were hunter-gatherers, the problems of the public goods was how to distribute the hunt, or keep the fire lit, or to do, or protect against the next band of people on the other side of the river. Now we face the global scale challenges of survival, of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, ocean biodiversity, ecosystem scale functioning, war and peace issues. So we don't have governance institutions at the global scale that address this properly. The English word international is only 200 years old, by the way. The whole concept of international is a word invented actually by Jeremy Bentham. It's very surprising. It's counterintuitive. But it's a new word because while dreamers dreamt about the unity of humanity and nations or groups fought with each other, the idea of international problem solving wasn't such a huge issue until we had intensive global scale interaction. So if you ask me why am I optimistic, I'm not especially optimistic, but we have true global scale challenges that need true global scale public goods now. We have to find a way to provide it. We're not optimally organized for that. If we were doing a design system of what should governance look like, how should political institutions be designed, the question, by the way, that Aristotle asked in the Politics in 330 BCE when he studied all the constitutions of the city-states and asked which is the best, that's what we should be doing in an optimal design problem. And it's a good question. Great PhD thesis. What do you do in a world of global public goods? What new institutions do we need? In practice, we invented the League of Nations in 1921 and it failed. Because even the inventor of it, Woodrow Wilson, could not convince the US Senate to support it. And the US never joined, and historically it proved to be incapable of stopping the next war. And the next idea came from another US president, Franklin Roosevelt, to make the United Nations. It was a very good idea. It's filled with flaws, by the way, that reflect power structures of 1945. It still is an incredible idea compared to not having it. So my approach is, my God, we had better control greenhouse gases. We have the following structures. What do we do? I'm trying myself to say, let us think about what we really need to do, and then show that you can create at least a cooperative solution that sustains that outcome. How far have we gotten? We've gotten to an agreement on what we need to do. We've gotten to the agreement that we should decarbonize specifically by mid-century, and that's as far as we've gotten so far, and time is running out. So we've gotten to the idea of a global action. We've gotten even now to a numerical quantitative target and a timeline. That's a big advance. But, oh my God, if I could introduce you to US senators, you'd understand the problem. Not the brightest bulbs in the box. And quite corrupt, by the way. So this is really, to answer your question, am I optimistic? I'm rather desperate, I would say. But we don't have the luxury of inventing things purely in our head. We have to find the practical solutions rather quickly now, because this is a time-bound problem.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask the President Fujii to...
I may talk about this water drain from the nuclear power plant. So this is, this is also, again, the problem of the communication. And also communication between, so in one side it's between science and maybe people. As she said about the kind of how to make a kind of general public educated. That is also, part of the our also role to be able to bring all this scientific knowledge into the public. So that then my view is so we are so far not so good at. we haven't been so good at doing such kind of communication. And so we really need to, in fact, improve the way how we would bring all this scientific knowledge and also use of scientific knowledge in society. So that is really important. So not just a kind of presentation of a scientific discovery, but also the use of scientific knowledge is so important. So that is one thing. And then another thing is what we can do is, as I have said at the beginning, like from the citizens' viewpoint, for example. So we could, for example, let the people, so how we could let people think about this situation. And then, so that is ultimately leading to, the, for example, politics, for example, where the democracy, so that so all these citizens can make a kind of movement. But involving all these people, maybe in that region, or like the people coming from around the world, then involve them to, for example, think about or to really have a look at the quality of the water there, for example. So that might be a kind of good opportunity for them to think about what would be the contribution that I can make, or what could be the ideas that I can come up with to solve this situation. So, but in any case, it's so important for us to involve all these people, citizens, into this issue, and for them to be able to think about. So, then for that also, so current situation, I also have the feeling that it is involving so many people, but normally it is like, politics, international politics, and also the local, people who are, for example, fishermen there. So they are very much serious about, so they feel like quite, so they are basically worried about all these, how do you call it, kind of reputation risk in that region. So that also, but I don't know much about the politics, but at least this reputation risk can be somehow relaxed by having some more communication from our side, from scientific side, science side, to the general public. That is my topic.
Thank you so much, President Fujii. Thank you so much, Professor Sachs. Are you sure? Yes, second. You are late already for 20 minutes for the next meeting.
I want to discuss the water issue for one moment also. I have no idea what the answer is. I know what I would do was first stop, and that is to speak with people who know about the issue and really canvass the range of opinion and listen to the debate among them. That would be the first thing. But then, here is the problem. As Francis Bacon said 400 years ago, knowledge is power. So people who know don't necessarily tell the truth. In academia, they generally do, because our reputation depends on being right more than on some other considerations. But when you listen to opinions, you have to be very critical who's speaking. In 40 years of my experience, I've learned, for example, that my government lies repeatedly, pervasively. I believe almost nothing right now that's said on critical issues. This is a terrible problem for communication because they are not trustworthy. They are not worthy of our trust. But I don't believe what Mark Zuckerberg says either, because he's got a different goal. My government has a goal of power. Zuckerberg has a goal of wealth or dominance of Meta or whatever it is. So they continually lie. So this is where we have a real issue. And when you take a technical issue, it becomes very complicated because the number of people who truly understand is very small. Very small. And then what are the incentives of those people? Are there incentives clarity and honesty? Are they, thank you, I work for the government, trust me? Or I work for this company, trust me? We have not solved this problem with almost any technology, any advanced technology. So we face it with the water of the reactors. We face it obviously with the artificial intelligence. We face it with bioengineering, where I led a commission about COVID. And I realized only a year into it that what our most trusted communicator was saying, Tony Fauci, was lies. Now it's coming out because of leaks of emails. But he was lying about what they knew and didn't know about the origin of the virus. So the communications issue is an extremely important issue to study. How can we govern advanced technologies responsibly when there is a huge asymmetry of knowledge and when it's not simply a matter of making people understand something, but rather the management of a highly valuable commodity, which is scarce expertise that can be used in a wrong way. So there's so many interesting issues about what you asked. Write a good PhD dissertation about it.
All right, good. And now my challenge is to find a way to close this discussion. We miserably failed, speaking by 25 minutes. But I hope this extra time really give you enough and sufficient excitement and courage and also sense of responsibility to move ahead, so that the future is really at your hand. So that you got it, I hope. And then I just would like to ask Professor Sachs, President Fujii, and all of you to make this matter so exciting.